Yeah, what's going on, y'all? Back. I had to upload that video real quick and jump right back on this alpha. I left off, I think, the last canon. This is all off the top, documentation purpose. You know what I'm saying? Just documenting my little journeys and lessons, to put it humbly. But yeah, canon 10. I was talking about the auxiliary bishops and then the limitations. I think I got all of that out as far as like them only being able to elect subdeacons, and that's pretty much it, basically, as far as that one. Then you got um Canon 12. Actually, I'm gonna go to 21 first. Okay, Canon 21 is basically about the funds of the church. They allow for it, based on what they wrote about canon, what they wrote in Canon 25, they allow, or the bishops are allowed to, they got a little leeway as far as like the money, like they can spend money on clothes and food, and like I always say, more than likely housing as well, even though it's only mentioned about clothes and food, but they're allowed to take money out to make themselves comfortable so they could perform their duties without unnecessary concerns. You know what I'm saying? So they're able to do that, but if they are found doing otherwise, like they're spending the money for narcissistic reasons, not taking care of the bills and the responsibility of the church, paying for rented farmland, etc., then yeah, they will act. There's a harsh punishment for that as well. They'll be punished for that. That's Canon 21. Canon 19 is about electing a bishop. The whole tradition of it, basically, like the stipulations. Like if you are a bishop, for your election, for your, being placed in such a position to be legitimate, you will have to be voted through a synod. And then I think you have to be in front of an archbishop as well, and possibly an emperor. Either one of those. As well as around like your clergy and everybody are responsible for getting you elected. And if this is not the case, then your position will be nullified. That's 19. Then another one before that one that I remember is not 18. I'm going to say 15. '15 is like if this right here concerns more so like going to the emperor in person. Like if you somebody that like, say for instance you was a bishop, but see this also applies to like people of lesser positions as well. Again, deacons and presbyters. But like if you were a bishop, for instance, and you ended up getting deposed from your position through a vote for whatever reason, instead of going through the regular process, if you chose to go see the emperor for yourself, instead of writing letters to your archbishop, then as far as like what's written in the original Nicene canons about, which was canon 5 to be specific, about these people having the rights, bishops in particular, but anybody but bishops having the right to where if a decision is made to where they lose their position, they're able to follow up for a retrial at another synod, because they were all like under obligation to have synods at least twice a year, annually. So if something like that happened, they were supposed to go through that process, to get a fair trial or retrial, and then through a vote, actually, that's not 15. That could be 11 or 12. Let me see. Was it 15 or 11, 12? I know, like, you have to go through the regular process, through the higher ups, to speak to an emperor through letters. as far as you being deposed, the process would be you having to try to have like another trial at a synod. But if you chose to try to go around that and you complain to the emperor, then your right to have another trial is immediately stripped away from you. All right, that's the punishment. I believe that is 15, if not 11 or 12. As far as 14, 14 is no, you know what? What I explained about 19, I think that's canon 15. Damn, I can't believe I fucking forgot, and I do not want to forget this. I think canon is okay. Canon. Damn, shit. Okay, I'm gonna skip that part for now. You know what I'm saying, and go back to faultiness. Hopefully, I remember the rest of those canons. There's only like 4 more I got to go through. But anyway, as far as faultiness, like I said, you know, he was all his or more so, yeah, Marcellus. You know, his teachings were condemned, but as far as like faultiness, weirdly enough, he ended up becoming a bishop anyway. But nowhere in fucking Turkey though. You know, especially being that his views is kind of like aligned with Marcellus. So he ended up becoming a bishop in Serbia, but in a place called Sirmium. 2 years later in 343. Again, he was condemned at this conference, so it was no prospect, you know what I'm saying, coming out of that whole little conference with him. But he did get elected as bishop there in Serbia in 343. As far as Marcellus, he got elected in that same year, 343, as bishop in a place called Serdica. That's where he got elected as bishop at. Even though his position really didn't last that long either. But as far as like going back to faultiness had quite a few people that was kind of like voting against him. Like, for example, in, what was it, the following year, actually it's Marcellus, I was going to say something about 344, but actually in 345 and in 347, the bishop of Milan, place called Milan, which is in Italy, somewhere in northern Italy, kind of voted to have him condemned. So he was condemned both in 345 and 347. But nothing was said about him being taken off his post then. Only in 351 at another council, which was held there in Sirmium, that's when he was voted and finally taken off his post. So he was condemned, you know, prior to that as well. And, you know, obviously it had something more so to do with his exotic perspective, which is kind of sort of different from the semi-Arians, like I say, closer to what Arians believed, but definitely not really reflecting anything about paganism in itself. So that followed him. Now, in 351, he got exiled, and that's when I think they basically say, like, during the later years of his life, he was able to re-enter his see. Now I was kind of unclear on that. I'm like, okay, he was able to re-enter his see, but they didn't say like if he had became a bishop again or not. He was, so I took it like they was basically saying he was able to go back to Sirmium up until Emperor Julian came into being. That was in 361. Around that time. Well, yeah. Around that time, he was able to go back. By the time Emperor Julian was the Augustus. You know what I'm saying? But he died in 363. And they say that by the time Valentinian came into office and he became emperor, that's when he also excom. Well, I don't want to say excommunicate. Well, basically that's what he did. Kind of like he ousted him. But again, I'm unclear because I'm like, okay, was he a bishop or not? But whether he was or not, he was back in Sirmium still. So in 364, he was ousted. When he was ousted, that's when he went back into Antsira, and that's where he died at in 365. Well, at least, yeah. Well, at least around to the later period of his life. I don't want to say 375 because that's when Emperor Valentinian died. But basically, once Valentinian came back, and well, not came back, but became emperor, that's when he ousted Photinus from Sirmium. Now, as far as Marcellus, I want to say he's the person that died in 365. Either way, that's the whole story with them. So that's basically, I got through everything I wanted to really touch on. I'm trying to see about the canons because I'm getting them mixed up. I think canon 11. You know, it doesn't matter because those canons, I mean, they sort of different from, you know, the ones that's written during the Nicene conference, but it's not really that. It's not nothing that's really relevant. It's all just basically functional, little small shit. So that's basically everything. Now, this is leading up to Nestorius Part 3. Again, just going through this whole little prior history and some of the important key figures involved in this up until I get to the actual metaphysical arguments from the Bazaar of Heracleides. All right, that's produced by Nestorius himself. So again, this is just the background. So the next one, I'm just gonna go through the other councils that's subsequent to this. Another interesting fact, I'm gonna go ahead and mention it. As far as like doing the Council of Antioch, right, 341. It was somebody that was also arguing in favor of Marcellus, and he was supposed to have been a priest. And they say he was the priest of Ancira. He was arguing in favor of Marcellus, but also against the semi-Arians and again the quote-unquote pagans. But ultimately was unsuccessful. But since they took Marcellus off his post in Ancira, prior to this, that is when they made that guy himself the bishop from that point. But he also died later on as well. He died in 362. Somehow he was also responsible for the persecution of Julian, Emperor Julian, you know, who was only emperor for like 2 years, 361 to 363. So that guy who spoke up for Marcellus was, you know, had something to do with his persecution. So he ended up getting tortured and killed as well. But as far as like going back to that period, you know, when they, you know, put out that creed against him, Marcellus, that's when they made that guy, the Basil of Ancira, a bishop, or was placed in his spot, or placed in his see. So I'm assuming a bishop as well. But you know, as far as him, not too much information is available about him. They say it's meager. You know what I mean? They don't even put like, you know, exactly like when I read about him and I clicked on his name, they don't even provide any information as far as like what took place once he was placed in Marcellus's position. So that's it.